Did what I'm about to tell you still leave me questioning what is real and what's not? This happened to my dad and me, and even now, 2 years later, I get chills just thinking about it. I know how it sounds. If I were you, I wouldn't believe it either. But I swear to you, every word is true. 2 years ago, my dad and I traveled to go camping at a spot out in the deep country. We enjoyed doing this as it was often a very nice time to get away from real life. This place in particular was a nice spot. Hiking trails, zip lines, a bit touristy, but it had deep history. Native American lands, you know. The first night there, it was perfect. Families at other campsites, campfires everywhere, kids laughing, the kind of peaceful night you go camping for. We cooked hot dogs, roasted marshmallows, cracked open a few beers, and made small talk with the people around us. A typical, peaceful first night. But the second night is when things started to change. The staff told us we were the only ones in the park. Nobody else had booked a site. At first, we were psyched. A whole campground to ourselves. It sounded peaceful. We spent the day hiking, fishing, and taking it slow. At one point, we listened to a scary podcast while sitting by the river because, why not lean into the spooky atmosphere? We thought we were being funny. By the time the sun started setting, we were feeling good, a little buzzed from the beers, tired in that satisfying way after a long day outdoors. We decided to head to the park's information center to charge our phones and grab some snacks before it got too dark. The walk back to our campsite, that's when the unease set in. The woods felt different. The air was heavier. The sky had this weird tint, like twilight didn't want to leave. My dad turned to me and said, "Doesn't this feel off? Like we're in some kind of dream?" And he was right. It did. The forest felt endless, stretching out in every direction. My chest got tight. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. We didn't say much after that, just kept walking, both of us glancing over our shoulders like we expected to see something lurking in the trees. Back at camp, we stayed close to the fire. We didn't really talk about the weird feeling. We didn't need to. It was like we both silently agreed to keep things normal, pretending nothing was wrong. We roasted marshmallows, played music, even smoked some weed to try and distract ourselves. Not the typical father-son moment you would expect. By the time the sun dipped below the trees, we could no longer see what was in front of us, except for the fire. That's when the uneasy feeling had grown into something worse. As we sat by the campfire and roasted some s'mores, at about 9 o'clock, we heard a noise. It was a bang, as if a tree fell. It came out of nowhere, loud and close. It echoed through the woods from the direction of the river, maybe 100 yards away. We grabbed our flashlights and pointed them toward the sound, but there was nothing. No movement, no glowing eyes, nothing. Bigfoot, we joked, nervous laughter slipping out. But neither of us believed it. A few minutes passed. Then it came again, louder this time, farther off, but the same sound, same weight. We shined our lights again, but the forest swallowed our flashlights, allowing us to see only the trees surrounding our tent. And then, the third bang, closer. That's when the fear hit. Whatever it was moving toward us, like it was circling the campsite. Then, not even before we were able to collect our thoughts, the fourth bang happened, about 20 yards away, maybe less. That's when the real fear and adrenaline set in. Whatever high I had going from the weed was now long gone. My dad turned to me with his eyes wide. I saw the fear in his face. We agreed to get in the tent. We quickly scrambled and threw the last of the firewood onto the fire, hoping the flames would scare off whatever was out there. Then we scrambled into the tent, leaving everything else behind. I ran inside the tent and quickly dropped to the ground, lying flat. My dad, moving a little slower, followed right behind me. As he was about to get into the tent, that's when the loudest bang happened. So close, it felt like the ground shook. My dad froze, staring out into the dark. I said his name, grabbing his attention as he stared in shock. Then, quickly jumping into the tent, he muttered, "It's standing there." "What's standing there?" I asked. "I don't know," he said, his voice trembling. It was like a wall of darkness. He sat by the zipper as I buried myself under my sleeping bag, trying to move as quietly as I could. He sat there clutching the only weapon we had, a small knife. Useless, really, but it was all we had. Then came this vibration noise that is still hard to explain to this day. It started low, like a hum, but it wasn't just sound. It filled the air. It was a feeling inside of us, making our chests tight. I've never felt anything like it. My dad whispered, "You hear that?" I couldn't answer. I just nodded, too scared to make a sound. With the feeling as if we were being hunted, this went on for about 5 minutes as we sat in silence. And then, this other sound. It wasn't an animal, and it wasn't human. It was this guttural, alien-like noise, as I like to put it. It honestly sounded like the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. Nothing I have ever heard before. We stayed frozen in that tent, too scared to breathe, too scared to move. I had this small mesh window right by where I was laying, but I refused to look outside of it with the fear of being seen. Just sitting there, trying to control my breathing, as my dad still sat there with the knife. And that's when the weirdest thing happened. In the middle of all the chaos, we just blacked out. Neither of us remembered trying to fall asleep. My dad was still clutching the knife when we woke up, lying in the middle of the tent. I woke up on my back, in a panic, as if something was standing over me. My first thought was to grab my phone to check the time, but it was dead. I asked my dad to check his. It was dead too. Both had been fully charged the night before, making sure we had them working in case of an emergency. We stepped outside to pee. As we stood 5 feet from the tent and peed back to back, still scared out of our minds, we saw that it was still pitch black outside. The air was cold and still. The food we left on the table, completely untouched. The fire we'd stoked before diving into the tent, burned down to ash like it was never touched. The whole place felt wrong, like we shouldn't have been there. We waited the night out in the tent without saying much to each other, just trying to get some real sleep. We packed up in silence, not saying a word until we were in the car. When we finally talked about it, we realized we both felt the same thing that night, watched and hunted, like something was waiting for us to slip up. We told my mom when we got back. She thought we were crazy, said maybe we got drugged or inhaled some weird gas. But it wasn't that. Whatever happened that night, it was real. We both experienced the same thing. To this day, we don't know what it was. We didn't see it. Not fully. But my dad came closest. Whatever he saw, it wasn't human, and it wasn't natural. We've never heard any story similar to ours. We haven't been back to that campsite since, or even gone camping. I don't think we ever will.